Ahoy there, goobers. Welcome to Create and Destroy. I'm your host, Dan Donnarumma. I can't believe we're already at episode 22. Shit's flown by. I'm very excited about my guests today. My two guests are Egin, Kongoli, and Rohan Lilauwala, both of whom are guitarists and vocalists for the Toronto band Respire. If you checked out the episode that I released back in January where I listed my favorite releases of 2018, Respire was one of the bands on that list. Their album Dénouement was my number 9 pick for top albums of 2018. It is an incredible album. What I love about Respire is that they pull from various genres. They are like a screamo, skramz kind of a band, but they incorporate, maybe some post-rock in there, some hardcore, some punk, and then they also feature orchestral instrumentation in their music, and they do it so well, and they are able to create a sound and a style that is very unique, very all of their own. So I was really excited that I got to have Rohan and Egin come on to the show and to sit down and speak with me. We talked about Dénouement, and they shared several really cool and interesting stories about all the hard work that went into creating that album, and hearing them talk about that just makes me appreciate their music and that album that much more. We also talked about Egin's struggles with addiction and how that worked its way into some of the songs on the album. We also talked about their Envy cover of Go Mad and Mark, and how both Rohan and Egin are immigrants and their experience as immigrants. Create and Destroy, this is a podcast that is me bumbling and stumbling, talking about music and talking to musicians. But if you are someone that likes the same kinds of music that I like, if you've grown up in a hardcore and a punk community or in a punk scene, I would imagine that you share similar types of political ideals that I do. We live in a very crazy freaking time, especially here in America. There's a lot of just bullshit going on, a lot of anti-immigrant rhetoric that is being thrown around left and right. But if you're someone that maybe is on the fence about immigration or is kind of in favor of anti-immigration laws being passed or a border wall being built along the American and Mexican border, I would ask that you take some time and try to envision what would compel someone to uproot their entire life, their entire family, leave behind all of their belongings, other family members, their friends, their community, and make a very arduous trek in hopes of being able to go to another country, be welcomed in, and be able to lay down roots in that new country. And think about all of that energy, all of the resources that those folks have to expend to make something like that happen. And then also the turmoil that they have to deal with, and usually the bullshit that they have to deal with. It's not something that people do just because they want to uproot their families just for the fun of it. There is serious reasons as to why that happens. So, again, I would imagine that most of you that are listening to this are sharing the same types of views that I do. But if not, I would ask again that you just take a second, think about that, and maybe hopefully kind of put yourself in those folks' shoes, and maybe that will change your mind. So without any more bumbling and stumbling for me, let's get right into it. Here's my conversation with Egin and Rohan. Egin, Rohan, thanks so much for sitting down with me and agreeing to have a discussion. Before we get started, would you guys first just introduce yourselves and then say what it is that you do in Respire?
Yeah, I'm Egin. I play guitar, I do vocals, and I write most of the lyrics.
I'm Rohan. I play guitar. I also do some vocals.
Excellent. Thanks so much, guys. Let's delve into Respire and your music. Let's say you were to describe the band to someone who's never heard your music before. How would you describe the music that Respire makes?
Oh, I feel like I deal with this on a regular basis, trying to describe what we do to people who don't know us. And I normally say something along the lines of, we're pretty loud and we have screaming, but we also have strings and horns, and we have some quiet, pretty parts. So you might be into it, or you might not.
Yeah, I usually say something like, it really depends on like the read of the person that I can get. but I'll say something like, orchestral hardcore or like orchestral black metal or I don't know. It really depends on who I'm speaking to. But I generally say like orchestral black and post rock, orchestral. I don't know.
Yeah, it depends on how aware someone is of all the micro subgenres that are out there.
So what's someone's reaction when you're telling them, like, yeah, we play heavy music, but there's this orchestral element to our music? And if they don't really know kind of what you guys do, how do people respond or react to that?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Oh.
So like Metallica with violins?
And they're probably thinking like, what the fuck are they talking about?
No. Every so often, for sure, you'll end up talking to like a person who might, but we like almost all of us work 9 to 5 like straight jobs. So the people we interact with on a day-to-day basis that know that we play music are just like, oh, okay, like this sounds pretty fucking weird, but
that's hilarious, man. And so when you guys first started playing together, what year was this?
We first started playing in Respire together in 2013, but we had all kind of been playing in bands with each other before. I had been playing in bands with Darren since 2008. Egin had been playing in bands with Darren for a while. Darren and Ben, I think, Darren and Ben. Yeah, Darren, Ben, and I were in another band. So we all kind of had been playing in bands together since probably 2008 or 2009.
Yeah, we were all kind of like the new kids on the block, so to say, in like the Toronto kind of DIY scene. I think in the like late 2010s when 2000s and early 2010s when we all met each other. Rohan actually messaged me on MySpace in like 2000 and I don't know, like 9-ish.
Oh my God, MySpace, dude.
And when I went to university, I started my first kind of like, emo violence band. I actually hadn't really met anybody that listened to that kind of music before. So, I mean, I came from like indie rock and post rock and stuff like that. So I just ended up in this community. And actually the first show I played with that project was with Darren, Rohan and Darren's band. And then we had a split together and then we became friends and so on.
Gotcha. So you guys had a pretty good rapport already before the band started.
Yeah, for sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
When you guys were first forming, how did you guys wind up deciding that you were going to start playing together, start making music that would eventually become Respire?
Like we were saying, we were at a point where we had a couple bands before. I had this kind of like tappy kind of emo band with Darren, and our drummer kind of fucked off, so I wanted something new. And at the time, there was a band from Ottawa called Alaskan that I really, really loved, and I loved that kind of like heavier sort of sound. And I used to play post-rock bands, and I kind of wanted to do that sort of thing again. So I was talking to Darren, and we started, kind of writing together at his house. And Rohan was actually Darren's roommate. And
yeah, I remember coming home because I was traveling. I was in Europe for a few weeks, and I remember coming home and Darren and Egin were playing songs in my basement. And I remember talking to my girlfriend at the time, and I was like, I need to be part of this. I was like, I need to snake my way into this somehow. So I was like, guys, I think this band would sound a lot better with 3 guitar players.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how Rohan came into the whole thing. And then Travis, our drummer, we had tried like 1 or 2 other drummers, and it didn't really work. And then I guess Travis was a friend of ours.
Yeah, the other people were kind of just around, and once we started writing songs and made a couple of sort of lo-fi demos and tabs and set them around, people were definitely kind of into it and wanted to be part of it. So
was the whole thought to make music that you guys would the sound that you guys eventually harnessed, or was it you were kind of working things out and the sound that you guys would eventually kind of make was what you were making out of the gate?
Well, so I think like right away we wanted some sort of like other instrumentation. My first sort of band experience when I was in high school had like violin and viola and things of that sort. So I definitely wanted to have that experience again and do it a little more seriously. Emmett, our trumpet player, is actually somebody that I knew in university. He studied jazz at the University of Toronto, and I didn't study music, but I was there. We had been friends the whole time, and he kind of just had suggested at the end when we graduated, he was like, oh, we should play music together. So I kind of just hit him up, on a whim. And then he was actually pretty down with what we were doing, so he became a pretty regular part of it. And then when we were recording Gravity and Grace, it made sense to kind of include a little bit more. And then I think our producer, the guy who recorded and mixed both our records, Paul Mack, he really kind of lit pushed us to include more and kind of be bigger when we were recording Gravity and Grace. And by the time we were in the studio for Dénouement, I think we had a much better idea of how big we wanted things to sound.
Yeah, I think we started off with the idea that we wanted to be ambitious and kind of push the envelope and do things that are interesting and that other bands hadn't been doing, but we didn't. It definitely took us a couple of years to figure out exactly how we wanted to do that. And there's some slightly cringe experiments along the way. Anthems for Falling Stars, talking about you, that kind of show what we tried and how we got to where we got right now.
How many members did you have starting out?
I think we had six, I guess. We had, because there was the three of us, three guitar players, bass, drums, and trumpet. And then ever since then, our trumpet player sort of stepped back a little bit, and we've added a violin player, Aslan. But our trumpet player kind of shows up from time to time and participates, and we kind of have a revolving door of other contributors. Everyone's really busy, and they're what we like to call real musicians who are teaching and playing shows for money, and have bills to pay through music that we don't. We don't want to hold them down and stop them from pursuing things that are actually going to pay the bills, but we do want to have them around, so we do let them come and go as they wish.
Yeah, it's I guess an open door policy. Yeah, as we call it. Sort of what ends up happening and trying to do this kind of band is that we have a little bit of a wider net than is our actual members. When it comes to recording, we can of course ask these people for their times and get them involved. And a lot of the times it's writing in the room with them when they come for the sessions. So things are sort of they're flowing and everything. But we also ask them, to perform with us when they can, and a lot of the times they can't. So I would say it's like a 6 to 9 person group at any given time.
Currently, it's still 6 full-time members in the band, correct?
Yeah,
sort of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Our trumpet player kind of comes and goes. I think we all would like it to be him to be around more, but
our next show, which is in a week, with Portrayal of Guilt from Texas, we're going to be 7. We'll have the trumpet and the violin, and in an interesting turn of luck, when we were in Europe this past time, we actually did our second half of our leg with Emmett as well. We picked him up on tour after his other band finished European tour, and then we were able to tour as a 7-piece as well, and that was, I think, really special for us. We hadn't had the opportunity to really have that experience with Emmett before, and he kind of laid the groundwork for a lot of the early years of this band. So we don't know, I think right now we definitely want horns. We definitely want to keep bringing different people and influences in. It's just kind of a matter of how do you find those people. Yeah.
That's awesome that you guys got to pick them up. Where were you in Europe that you were able to pick them up and then start playing some shows?
This is probably one of my favorite moments of tour. We were about halfway through. His other band, it's a pop punk band called QQQ, and they had just wrapped up their tour. And so we picked him up halfway through our tour at the Budapest airport. And
he flew in from Nice. Flew in from Nice to Budapest.
And we drove up, and it was one of those airports where if you're not in and out in less than 2 minutes, you have to pay for parking. So we drove up. As we're driving up, we open the door, we're all cheering. He jumps in, and we drive off, and we're still cheering. So I think he had a really great first start of tour, and then we had a lot of fun with him.
The first show that we played with him was this completely bonkers festival called Family Fest in the forests of Slovakia, forests of Slovakia, and it was just a very very wild thing to come into, but it was great. I can't imagine doing one tour and then immediately doing another one, but he seemed to have a really great time, and we did for sure.
That's awesome. How the hell does a band book a tour in Europe?
Darren, Travis, and I played in a band called Fox Mulder before Respire, and we ended up touring Europe in 2015 with a band from Serbia called Eagle Has Landed, and they kind of booked that whole tour. So as they booked the tour and as we played all these shows, we met all these awesome European people. Once we put out Gravity and Grace, and we wanted to explore touring Europe, I had all these contacts already, so I kind of hit them up, and some of them knew who we were, and some of them liked who we were, and we had a couple of European labels as well, and they spread the word a little bit. So it was a lot of kind of messaging people and telling them who we are and trying to get shows. And the first tour was definitely hard to book. There was a lot of messages with no responses, a lot of sorry, can't help you. Try this person, a lot of kind of convoluted drives. I think we drove like 4 ways across Czech Republic on that tour. And then our last tour in 2018 came together really, really quickly because I guess we had Dénouement was out or was just coming out at that point. And we started, I guess more people started paying attention. I guess we probably left a fairly good impression on the people that we played with or hung out with in Europe the first time. You know, we're all pretty friendly and I want to say fun to be around on tour. So people kind of wanted us back. And the second tour was a lot easier to book just because we kind of we laid the groundwork and we had those relationships already.
I think a really fundamental thing about how we do things in Respire is I think because there's so many of us, we can really delegate tasks and try to manage the operations a little bit better. We're completely a DIY sort of entity and there's nobody else helping us do any of this. You know, being part of a really great kind of global DIY community, being able to tour Europe and make those connections and make those friendships, you know, and hopefully give back to other bands. I mean, Rohan and I both book and run shows in Toronto with a collective called New Friends DIY, you know, and we have a lot of people that we play with come through our city to host them here and things like that. So it's been all about kind of building those relationships and fostering that community at home and also being part of it abroad.
So I'm just thinking this is pretty much like every aspect of life, right? It's just kind of like connections, who you know, using your network, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you know, finding people that really share a same sort of ideal and, you know, I think some people get it. In Toronto, it's a little bit of a hard city and you don't meet a lot of people that kind of get it, you know, or at least like kind of the whole point of DIY or working hard to kind of have a community. But so I guess it's, you know, some of the wonderful things about touring is that you go so far and you just fucking meet people that just really, really get it. And so it's easy to connect and it's easy to develop really, really close, I think, friendships really fast and want to do things together and see each other again.
That's really cool. Now, to delve back into what we were talking about, the band was first forming. You guys knew you wanted to have like at least to some degree, an orchestral element to the band. Did you ever have doubts on how people might receive that with the style of music that you were playing, or was there ever any hesitation?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely, I think, I don't know about doubt, but it was like a kind of like an LOL question. We were like, oh my God, like, you know, I think we always knew that either people were gonna get it or they're just gonna be like, wow, I hate this. And like next, you know, and we're like, okay, well then we lose that person.
I think we kind of rationalized it to ourselves as this is definitely us trying to convince ourselves that this is going to work. I think we were like, either they like us or they won't understand it.
Yeah, they'll be like, you know, this kind of thing, that these two things don't belong together, you know. But I mean,
I think if anything, it has probably opened more eyes to us because, you know, when you're at a hardcore show or a punk show or screamo show or a metal show, and all of a sudden there's a violin player and a trumpet player on stage warming up. And the things they're playing are beautiful because they're significantly more talented than pretty much everyone else at the show. It's kind of a, hey, you know, let me at least see what they're about, and at least it gives us a sort of a hook or something to get people to at least kind of pay attention to us.
Yeah, so I guess it's a little twofold. You know, it's like within kind of the hardcore community or sort of the extreme music community. It's the idea that like, maybe it might not work, but I think Rohan's right in the kind of when we were trying to figure out how this was gonna sound or what we sort of wanted to push in the beginning. I think there was some sort of kind of conscious understanding that, like, you know, these elements or writing and crafting melodies and songs this way might actually help us and help bring other people sort of into this kind of music. I mean, whether or not that's happened, I don't know, but yeah.
For me, the first time I heard you guys, that was one of the things that I was just like, holy shit, this is awesome as hell. And I think it without a doubt helps you guys stand out from other bands that are doing similar types of music. And I know you guys released the accompaniment to Dénouement Memorial. And in listening to that, what's so cool is just the Memorial alone, the components of what you hear in the orchestral instrumentation, it sets up the vocals and the drums and the guitars so well and so perfectly, and it helps make, you know, for certain songs either like a brooding element to it or as you were saying earlier, a very beautiful element. And I feel like when I listen to your music, it's such a goddamn experience, man, because you're hearing this really heavy music and it's accompanied by this beautiful music. So it's a very, very unique like listening experience.
It's pretty fun. It's also an extremely unique playing experience, I think, which also really, really hits home hard. I think the couple times that we've played with like 9-10 people on stage, I can specifically remember the Gravity and Grace record release. I mean, I had all the horns behind me, and like it's awesome. Like it's I think we really love this kind of music and playing this kind of music because it's cathartic and because there's a sense of relief and release. And I think for us anyways, it just feels like it really kind of helps that, like you said,
Yeah, it adds that sort of that level of sort of melancholy during the sad parts, but also sort of that, especially the horns, I think, had that sort of level of that sort of triumphant feeling during the cathartic parts and the moments of release. And I think that's, one of the things that we have always been trying to capture is mood and have our sort of music, tell a story and reflect the lyrics and have, moments of building tension, moments of release, and moments of catharsis. And I think that having those orchestral elements can really add to both building the tension. I think, something like violin is really, really great for building tension and then for releasing that tension. So I think that's one of the things that I really enjoy about having those additional elements in the band is the ability to really sort of strengthen and add some more weight to whatever mood we're trying to capture at the moment.
How long did it take for you guys to figure out how to implement those, we'll say like untraditional instruments for this style of music? How long did it take for you guys to figure out how to implement those in an effective way and in a way that you liked, that you felt was really improving the songs that you were writing?
I think we're still figuring it out.
Yeah. I don't think we're done figuring out how to do it yet. I think that's the easiest answer. I think because the way that we do things, I think when we record it, at least the way that we did it, I guess both times, is that we generally record the bass of everything, the guitars, the bass, the drums, and lay all that tracking down. And then we kind of start, putting in piece by piece, sort of starting from the most written orchestral elements. So whether on Gravity and Grace that was trumpet, on Dénouement that was violin, and then we'll pretty much just have days. I mean, so in Dénouement we recorded all the guitars and all that stuff in Hamilton, which is like a couple hours away from Toronto, and then we recorded all those other instruments in like 3 different places within the city, in bedrooms and wherever we could pretty much find a time and a place for our friends and our friends of friends to come in. So for example, Andrew, who played saxophone on Dénouement and like really sets the whole mood for Haunt, the second song. We had never played with him before. I mean, this was literally the first time that we had met this guy. I mean, he just walked in the door and we were like, hey man, like here's the song, here are the, we also technically score everything out. So, to have some sort of like an actual written accompaniment. But yeah, sometimes it just really works. I think for Andrew's a great example in that he started playing and immediately we were able to kind of, pick the things that he was doing that we liked. And we're like, that's it right there. Just do that in this way, or for the next part, let's maybe try it like this. I think it's a lot of writing on the spot.
Yeah, I think something like probably like I want to say 80 or 90% of the orchestral elements were not written before the day of recording them.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of trust. I think we trust each other's intuition and opinion. I think about the parts and as the songs are evolving, and it's just like a whole like zone. I mean, Rohan and I put like 400 hours each in the span of like a month and a half to get all of Dénouement done, like re-recording vocals to adding other, people's inputs from across the province and like just all sorts of things. So you're just kind of in a space, and I think, by the time we get to do those orchestral things, I think we're really in the zone, and it's just a matter of like, what is this record, and how do these songs work together, and how can we tell this story across.
Yeah, we were lucky enough too to be working with three. We joke about having a producer and audio engineer pyramid scheme where every record has more, and we had to recruit additional engineers. But the ones we worked with were all, we trusted them all, and we respected all of their opinions and their inputs because we worked with them because they get it. And I like to think that there's no way that they would have done all of the work they did for us for probably not enough money unless they also kind of enjoyed working with us. And so I think they definitely also had some great ideas and also knew how to help guide where we wanted to go.
So what you guys just told me is like straight up blowing my mind, because earlier you're saying like you guys aren't real musicians and that the other folks in your band are. And I'm just thinking like, holy shit. So this guy, you had just met him and he comes into your like practice space and just starts putting together something that you had already scored. And I'm just like, holy fuck, like how is this all working? I'm like super impressed by this. So first, how did you guys meet Andrew or get to basically get him to agree to like take part in this?
Andrew, we know from our kind of second trumpet player, Tom. How do we know Tom?
Tom is like a Toronto musician savant, and he's he was on, I think he was on like 4 records this year that were nominated for the Junos, which is like Canada's version of the Grammys.
What's Tom's last name?
Tom Moffat.
He plays in the Arkells, which is like a big, I guess, pop radio band.
He just kind of showed up one day. He's like a friend of a friend. And
he had this other sort of like weird band that used to play in this DIY space called Soy Bomb, and we played with his band a couple of times, and they were a lot of horn players in that band. So when we recorded Gravity and Grace, Paul was like, you have to ask those guys if they want to play horns. I just remember.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how Tom joined the band. So anyways, when we recorded Gravity and Grace, we actually had a saxophone as well. Julian, who was Tom's bandmate in that band that we used to play with. But Julian was out of town when we did Dénouement, so we just asked Tom. We were like, hey man, like do you pretty much have any like saxophone players that might be down to do this? And he was like, yeah, let me think, like, maybe this guy Andrew would be up for it. So we got in touch, and he was. I mean, I think the only way this can work really is if we only ask a day of people. Like if it's a random guy and we have to ask him to come in day after day, it's not going to work, right? Like he's just not going to do it for free. So it really has to be like it's a couple hours. You're coming in. We're just gonna work it out, and what we get is what we get.
We'll feed you, and we'll have some beers. Yeah, that's kind of all that's in the budget.
Yeah, and it's like if we end up liking it, then this stuff will end up in the songs. We'll just get takes, and hope that there's something. But I think because we do things like that, we knew that Andrew was really only gonna appear probably in these couple songs, and then so we start there, and we get those songs, Haunt being one of them, really down, and then we move to having, I guess, a little more fun or seeing what we can do.
That's incredible, man. So like when you're going into preparing these songs, it's kind of like we're hoping that we can get some like orchestral instrumentation into these songs, but we might not necessarily get them, just depending upon how things work out over the few hours that we might have this musician with us.
Yeah, I think that element of the orchestra and what that is going to be in entirely is a question. Like I think because Eslin wrote all the songs with us, violin and viola were both heavily in Dénouement right off the bat with the guitar. So I think those elements and those melodies and those things were there. In the story of Andrew, it's just like the actual lines that he was playing and certain changes that he just came up with. The closing track, Dénouement, right? That whole thing is just like one take improv. Pretty much. He just played that whole thing, start to end, and we were all like 6 of us in the room, just like, dead silent, just listening to him. And we were like, that's great, like we're done.
Yeah, we were supposed to record in an art space, but it turns out the space sounded like kind of like nails on a blackboard, and it was like a big glass room. So Egin called me and he's like, hey, can we record in your room? And I was like, okay, my roommate's home, I think they can let you in. So I showed up at at 6 o'clock after work, and there's like 6 people in my 80 square foot bedroom sitting on my bed. One of them broke my bed because there were so many people on my bed. But Andrew just basically played one take of that part
and wrote that song,
and essentially made the song, took it to the next level, and a level that we kind of didn't even sort of anticipate it going to.
So that's for sure like a really I think like best case scenario story. I mean, there's obviously a lot of the process doesn't usually end up in like holy fuck moments, but that was definitely one of them.
Dude, that's incredible. Like I said, that straight up blows my mind. Like I think that speaks to the band and to you guys, your level of creativity, your level of musical ability. So shit, man, like, yeah, I'm just kind of like dumbfounded right now by what you're telling me. To kind of back up a little bit, you guys in 2016, you released Gravity and Grace, and that album is so goddamn awesome. Going into working on those songs, what was your hope for that release? Like, what were you guys looking to accomplish with that album?
I think Gravity and Grace was kind of we have all these songs, let's try and make a record and stitch them together in a way that kind of makes sense and have a narrative. And it wasn't Gravity and Grace wasn't, there wasn't a sort of a stroke of genius and a grand plan behind it. It was kind of we have all these songs that we've been working on, let's clean them up and put them together in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's a nice way of putting it. We recorded Gravity and Grace for like 9 months.
It was a mess.
Like 6 months, but it took forever. We didn't do it to a click. We didn't know. Like, we were just doing it sort of for the first time. Until that point, we had only ever done things off the floor. So we had never kind of done that, actual writing and recording music sort of thing. I think for me anyways, it was just like I just really want to make a record kind of thing. I mean, to that point, I don't know. I think you had a 12-inch split, but I never put out a full-length record. So, it was piece by piece. Like we said before, we hadn't necessarily thought that we were going to bring people in to add more layers until Paul actually mentioned it, like 4 months into recording or whatever, being like, oh, like, why don't you ask these guys to come in? They'll totally do it for a case of beer. But
it was one of those, it was 9 months and it was really messy. And our producer, Paul Mack, back then he was kind of recording us out of his home, which was also Soy Bomb, which used to be a DIY space in Toronto. Since then he's opened his own studio and he's kind of a professional audio engineer now. I'm just looking back and thinking about the recording process and how much work and headache we must have caused him, because it was like 9 months of recording. We didn't do it to a click. We probably made a million mistakes that he had to fix.
Like the files for Respire, like we're talking like hundreds of just files, like
hundreds of tracks,
scrolling for like minutes,
hundreds of tracks, and there's no easy way to make edits because nothing is everything's slightly off time because we're not playing to a click.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a mess. It kind of came together.
It's weird, right? Because like time passes and you look back. Now looking back, I'm almost like, how did people like it? Like, how did it fly? Like, it's it's just like so not a perfectly put together record, but I think that's exactly what it is. I think we were just sort of trying to figure out what a full scale Respire sound might be. Mm-hmm. And I think when we recorded Dénouement, we worked under very different circumstances. We pretty much decided that we wanted to tour Europe again, and then we decided that we had these songs and we should record them to have a record in time. So we're like, okay, if we're gonna have this in time, the masters need to be pretty much out by like mid-February.
Are you talking about Dénouement?
Dénouement, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was like March.
Yeah. And like I was in rehab and got out at like December 15th. So we hit the studio in January. So January like 15th to like March, everything had to be done. So it forced us to be a lot more restrictive, a lot more kind of organized and controlled in the days and the people and the times and the fact that there's a click. We
did a lot of homework before Dénouement versus before Gravity and Grace. So before Dénouement, we, at least the guitar parts, we scored them all out using Guitar Pro. So we made sure that everything fits. There's no unintended dissonance. Using our sort of rudimentary knowledge of music theory, making sure everything kind of works together. We established all the tempos, all the transitions, and we used those as the base for our click tracks. And so we did all of this sort of homework so that we could get in there and really bang out Dénouement in a way that Gravity and Grace kind of got away from us.
So do you feel that Dénouement is a better representation of the music you're trying to make as opposed to Gravity and Grace?
I think so. There's probably a lot of people on the internet who are like, oh, Dénouement sucks, Gravity and Grace for life.
Yeah. Personally, I think it's just like a evolution. I think we're, like we said before, we're just trying to figure this out as we go. I think there's right now, for example, we're in the I'm in this very terrifying, anxious period where we have all these. We have some new songs and we're like, oh God, what do we add? How do we change this to be, different in a little ways from Dénouement, but a progression that makes sense and all these things. I think, we're in the little stages of that, when we were recording and fucking putting Dénouement together, and to the end of that, it was a very heightened sense of oh my God, none of this is gonna work. These parts are way too silly and goofy. No one's gonna like this. Oh my God.
Yeah, I think we were towards the end of kind of the Dénouement process. We were all kind of losing it a little bit. At least Egin, I, and Paul, our producer. I think Egin might have exaggerated a little bit earlier, but we, it was 2 months of essentially us having an extra full-time job on top of our full-time jobs. Because it was, we probably put in another 40 or 50 hours a week just on this stuff and on getting all the elements in Dénouement working. And I remember there was one night where we're chatting on Facebook or whatever at about 1 a.m. With Paul, our producer, and he says, hey guys, there's something wrong. This part doesn't work. I have the studio right now. If you don't come in right now, we can't do it for 2 weeks. And we ended up taking the subway out to kind of the suburbs of Toronto. He picked us up from the subway station, and we were there from 1 a.m. to 7 a.m. working on vocals. And there was one period of time where I think we were 2.5 hours into manipulating the fireworks sample at the end of Dénouement before we realized that no one cares about this except for us.
Yeah, I think we're happy with the way that we sound right now coming out of Dénouement. I think there's always that question, since we're writing new material kind of ongoing, we don't want things, I think, to just kind of generally remain stagnant. So it's always a question, right? And I think because we let ourselves kind of figure it out as we go, there's half of it is oh, we'll figure it out later, and half of it is just, I think we can actually let those things come together as they might.
Yo, screw the haters that aren't into Dénouement. That album is so goddamn good, man. It was one of my favorite albums last year.
Thank you very much.
So damn good. And one of the things that I love about your music is you guys had mentioned earlier, right, being into post rock, and I love that your music really invokes a true sense of emotion. I get when I listen to certain post rock bands or certain post-rock albums, and then accompanying that is lyrics that I think are really great. And when I listened to Dénouement for the first time, going through the lyrics, I was very surprised to see some of the themes that were being talked about in the songs, addiction being one of them. I did not realize at the time when I was first listening to this that you had struggled with addiction. Again, so when you were writing those lyrics in those songs, were you ever hesitant to delve into those themes, or was this just you kind of getting this off your chest and this is just you kind of expunging it, so to speak, and then it got to a point where you were happy with using them for lyrics?
Yeah, definitely more close to the second one. Lyrics for me are generally a fucking nightmare. I just it's a very hard process. I feel generally when I try to force something or write for the sake of writing, it just doesn't really happen. And Dénouement, I think, is definitely a good example of that. Pretty much. So I ended up checking into rehab in November of last year. Like we said, we started recording in January, so I got out in December of last year. By the time I had gone in, maybe 20% of the record was written, 15. By the time I got out in the subsequent weeks, that's kind of the period where all of it was written, most of it in rehab. And the most of it kind of generally is just pieces of my notebook built upon each other. So some of the things, Haunt is a song that was started on a subway. And so it talks about subways, and we brought the actual sounds of the Toronto subway into the beginning of the song and stuff like that. And A Heart Still Pines was that whole kind of ending of the record is kind of, me in rehab. I mean, so I kind of, it's been a shitty thing that's kind of been in and around my life for a very long time. It's affected kind of all of our relationships. Before, we were in, it's a very, very long story. When I kind of made the actual full decision to go to rehab and actually try to get clean and really try to move on from this thing that's kind of just been dragging me down for all this time, for it to be real, you gotta handle it in a real way. And I think it was just a way for me to try to make it more real. And I think it felt like if I would write songs about it, like I might not tell everybody about what's going on with me, so there's it's hard to have accountability in regards. But when you perform things and when you talk about it and you make it more public, it just becomes more real. It becomes more of a real thing in your life that you have to face, that's no longer something that you can run away from or you can hide from. So I think when I was in rehab and trying to make that kind of conscious decision to get the fuck over this, it was clear that when I was gonna get out of rehab, that this record was gonna be pretty much about this in as honest of a way that I could put it.
As you're saying this, I'm just thinking about playing music, playing shows where they're at bars or certain venues, and there may be after parties and shit. Do you find that playing in a band helps you try to continue down this path of being clean, or is it something where it almost becomes difficult for you?
I talk about this a lot with my therapist, kind of just generally around this topic. And what I think is this, I think, drugs kind of spoiled a lot of things for me, and it definitely, got its way into my music community and my musical experiences, of course, in the past. I can't deny that. Yeah, I think in general, I just always cared about music more than I cared about anything else in my life, including myself. And so I think throughout all of it, it was just kind of the only thread that I really could say mattered to me, and the people that I met and the experiences that I had through music. So I think even at the fucking worst of times, I really wanted to keep those things separate. And I think being able to do that has really helped. So yeah, we do play bars, but when I'm at a bar to play a show, or even at a bar to go to a show, to me, it doesn't feel like I'm at a bar. I'm at a show. I'm there for a different experience. So yeah, I don't drink anymore. I don't go to bars. I don't, do things like that. But I can still be at a show because in my mind, I guess I'm telling myself that this is for something else that I care more about than having a drink at this moment.
That's awesome.
Kind of from an outsider's perspective, we're watching Egin the last few years. I think that in the music community and especially in Respire, we all care about them and we want to make sure that they're on the right path, so we're watching out. And I feel like Egin has done the stupid shit that they do is when they're out with the Toronto kind of party people, not the music community. Yeah. So I think being around people that love and support you probably helps. Absolutely. Versus people that kind of just don't care and just want to party.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it, right? People come into recovery through community. Drug addiction is an extremely alienating thing. It alienates you from your loved ones. It alienates you from your coworkers, and alienates you from other drug addicts because it's all about you and what you need to get out of it. So, the best way of bringing anybody who suffers from addiction or mental health issues off the street or wherever they might be is to bring them into a community and give them value and give them worth and give them an understanding that, their life isn't just theirs, that there's other people involved and, it could be more than that. So yeah, I think all my recovery is very, very generally interlinked with my involvement in music and my involvement in DIY and in Toronto and in Respire.
So what's it like for you when you get to perform some of these songs that are delving into your addiction? Kind of what emotions do you feel? What thoughts are going through your head at times?
I think different shows are different. I think the very nature of writing music and then performing it over and over again is that your relationship to those songs definitely changes. That being said, when we play live, we generally tend to open with a sample I'd like, because we still generally play DIY shows, we're setting everything up and there's a whole lot of us, so it's like really, really chaotic before we start playing. And so I kind of personally like to have like some sort of a moment to take a breath and just kind of, collect myself and my thoughts, think about the things that the songs are written about, the days or things like that. Sometimes that's more effective than others, and sometimes you're really able to get there, and sometimes you're kind of just not playing through the motions in a kind of physical sense or whatever. But it's good, right? It's I think it's all part of what I said before, which is just like it's your therapy. You're getting through these things. It's harder at first, and it's every time feels a little different or heavier or whatever. But then touring, especially, and playing it day after day, it becomes different. At times maybe it becomes more of like an anthemic or like a cathartic thing in that way, as opposed to something that's sad. Maybe it's more angry, and maybe it's more revelatory or something. But yeah.
That's awesome, man. I fucking commend you, dude, for one, taking care of yourself and your health and your mental health. I think that's awesome. And I want to thank you for having that vulnerability and sharing that with us in the audience, and writing lyrics that delve into that. Like I said, when I listened to Dénouement for the first time and I saw what the lyrics were about, it made me appreciate the album that much more. More often than not, the music that I tend to like now, and the music that I tend to gravitate towards, is music that has that vulnerability and is delving into stuff that, just shit stuff that people deal with. So, so thanks, man, because I think it makes the album that much stronger.
Cool, man. Thank you.
So I want to talk about your recent Envy cover, Go Mad and Mark, because it is fucking awesome. It's so good. And the video that accompanies the song is such a great video. So essentially, right, it's just like found VHS recordings. So is that your like own recordings?
Yeah, it's my family recordings of my childhood. Yeah,
that is so awesome. I read on Stereo Gum the whole thought behind the video, and I thought it was so profound and poignant. So without spoiling it, could you kind of delve into the thought behind that video and the reasons why you decided to release that along with the cover?
Yeah, I guess Dave, who runs Zygama Beach Records, just had a little brain, whatever. Zygama Beach Records. He kind of came up to us with this idea of the Envy cover tribute comp sort of thing. And we obviously all really love Envy. We've all been listening to Envy pretty much since we were in high school. I think for a lot of us, it was our entrance and our kind of, foray into the whole world of emotional hardcore music and things like that. So yeah, we definitely, we were excited and we really wanted to do it. But aside from that, I grew up in Japan. I was born in Albania, and sort of right around the end of communism. And my dad was able to kind of get out of the country right as the regime fell. One of the lucky few to do it through education. So he went to Japan, and me and my mom sort of followed. I mean, my parents had grown up in a extremely repressive, controlling, closed down country, and for them, Japan was sort of the opening to the world, the opening to sort of every experience that had before then been closed off to them, And their experience as kind of post-communist immigrants trying to figure it out in Japan, and then coming to Canada again and being an immigrant a second time here when I was 10, and then trying to figure that whole experience out is, I guess, like drives at the core, obviously, of who I am. And in coming to the idea of like covering this Japanese song, it just kind of came all back because, I mean, for one, I don't speak Japanese anymore, and that was my second language. And I spoke it for, all of like 8 years. So because of, I guess, kind of all of these seeming similar points of connection, I guess it felt like maybe a good idea to push. And then Rohan is also an immigrant. And, I think that's definitely something in our friendship that I've always sort of recognized from the very beginning, is the fact that we have this kind of shared commonality experience as first generation Canadians who have come to this country at a very, very similar age, and trying to kind of, find ourselves in this society.
I think from personally playing music and being involved in music was something that really helped me feel like I belonged, and helped me, A, make a lot of friends, B, make me feel like I was part of a community. It was it made me feel, the welcoming nature and the friendships that I formed in the Canadian, music scene made me feel like I was Canadian. And I think that eternally grateful for that. And then I also think that, we're kind of in an age right now where, borders and walls are coming back into vogue. And people are finding ways and reasons to divide ourselves and other people who are not like us. I think it's really important to recognize the people that aren't like that and the people that have welcomed us to Canada, and also to express our solidarity with people who have been othered, and stand up to fascism and stand up to nationalism and to other forms of oppression. So I think that's that was kind of one of the driving forces behind the message that we are trying to get across.
Yeah, I think altogether it was kind of like like this is who we are and this is our experience, and it's something that we're proud of. It's not something that we choose to sort of hide away from. And I think as we kind of get to be a bigger band, I think a lot of different people come and see us online and don't necessarily know about our politics or don't necessarily know who we are. And I think it's a visibility thing as well. And I think we just want to, kind of get that story across.
Egin, your family was originally from Albania, immigrated to Japan and then to Canada. And how about for you, Rohan? Where did your family immigrate from?
Yeah, so I was born in Bombay, India, and we immigrated straight from India to the Toronto area. So less of a sort of a roundabout story, but still sort of a similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and how old were you when your family moved from Bombay to Canada?
I was about 13.
13. And how did for both of you guys, how did your families choose where you were going to immigrate to?
So I think my as many Indian families are, my family is kind of all over the world. And my mom happened to have a brother in Canada. They were looking for a new life and greater opportunities for me and my sister. So Canada is a fairly welcoming place. They had kind of the option of going through the process, and they picked it based on the opportunities that living in Canada would afford to us.
Yeah, for me it's a little bit more complicated because I guess it has to do with Japanese citizenship. As a foreign person, you pretty much can't have any sort of legal right to stay in Japan. So, like I said before, my dad moved there as a student. Once he finished his PhD, our bags were kind of getting packed. We sort of had to go back, and it just happened to be that he was offered a job and then kept having jobs. So we were staying in Japan through the 90s, sort of on his work visa after his student visa. And my parents were, not necessarily interested, obviously, in living in that sort of, question mark existence. And so they applied for immigration to a couple places, and Canada, obviously with its welcoming, environment and things like that, I guess they just picked it, I mean, I personally had never even been to North America before I got off the plane in Canada. I mean, I don't know if it was the same for you.
No, I had been to Canada before.
You'd been to Canada before. I had never been to Canada or North America. I'd only seen Asia and Europe at that point. So yeah, I don't know. Immigration is a weird thing when you're a kid, because
you don't really have a say in it.
You don't have a say in it. You don't really understand it. And you don't understand all the consequences of it. And you don't understand all the signs of displacement and diaspora until later on, until, you can look at kind of tearful goodbyes in a new light, or understand things differently,
Or understand the sacrifices that, your parents have made for you.
Oh, God, I'm sure.
Which is something that we're definitely, acutely aware of.
Rohan, what made your family want to leave Bombay and immigrate to Canada?
Well, I think one of the things that, Indian people are kind of look up to and is kind of the holy grail is to get an education in, the U.S. or Canada or Australia or the U.K. And, my parents could have never afforded to, send me and my sister to school in any of these places. We were by no means poor, but we were also not wealthy. And, they kind of realized that the way that would happen was for them to move to another place where those opportunities are more easily accessible.
When you guys look back on your life, your experiences prior to immigrating to Canada, what thoughts come to your head? What emotions do you feel thinking back to those years?
That's a hard one. I mean, when I look outside right now and there's snow on the ground and it's, minus 10 degrees Celsius, I'm thinking back to the pleasant tropical warmth and missing it. I don't know. That's what I'm gonna have to think about.
It's a weird question, only because I think, I it's weird, right? Because like I'm an immigrant and I know how I fit into my sort of immigrant story, and Rohan's an immigrant, and obviously he fits in his own way to his immigrant story, but I don't really know what that is. Like I don't, because we only met when we did in our lives. I don't know anything about Rohan's life in India and what that was like, and vice versa, right? So I think it's just like division, like I think when I think back to my life in Japan, it's just exactly that. It's a life in Japan. It's very fucking different. My school experiences were different, my social interactions were different, the way that I made friends was different. I think the difficulty of being an immigrant is that when you come to a new culture, those changes and those differences, you don't get them introduced one by one. They all fucking hit you at once. They all hit you at once, and you just have to figure it out. So when you're like 10 or 13 and you come to a new country with certain understandings of how I want to be treated, how I want to be seen in my social circles, how I want to fit into the school or whatever, and you don't, because the way the fucking schools and life ran where you come from isn't the way it runs here. So just all those differences, immigration is just like it's a Band-Aid being ripped off. It's all of it all at once. So when I look back, in my like sort of cynical mind, I'm like, oh yeah, I was like living in like almost bliss, like it was this life where like I hadn't even considered all these fucking issues of like, who am I? Where do I fit? Like all these things. So yeah, it's very different. It's almost like a new life starts when you immigrate somewhere,
And you guys had mentioned this earlier, right? It has become very acceptable, or much more acceptable today, to have an anti-immigrant sentiment. And you're seeing, especially here in America, man, anti-immigrant, xenophobic rhetoric being spewed from Trump and politicians. When you guys are seeing this or experiencing this in Canada or in America or wherever, kind of what goes through your head when you are seeing what's going on right now in the world?
A lot of anger and a lot of disappointment and a lot of disbelief. I think we talked about this together, quite a bit, and I think we might have talked about it in an interview as well in Stereo Gum. When we first came to Canada, it was 2001 for me. 2003 for Rohan, so my first week of school was during September 11th, 2001, and then my fucking introductions to North America was that wave of anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, and anti-foreign sentiment. And my dad's family's Muslim, and so there was a lot of confusion and a lot of kind of things that you have to figure out as a kid, kind of seeing all this rhetoric, And the 2000s definitely had its own rhetoric, and now we're in a very fucking different time with a whole new world of problems. I guess in the very beginning, it was, I can't believe this is happening again. I can't believe we're back here. I can't believe that, it was almost like waking up out of a very pleasant dream into a really shitty life. It's like, oh, great, those couple of years that we had where we thought things were fine. Like, oh, like we were kidding ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, what a joke was,
I remember the first time I toured Europe with my old band was 2015. And the European DIY scene is really, really great and really strong. And they're like avowedly political. And they have, anti-fascist organizing, and they're just very sort of aware of, what they stand for, and
they've had to deal with fascists,
and how they can address that. And I remember, thinking and talking to my European friends at the time and saying, oh, it's really cool that you guys do this, but it's not really a problem in North America. And then I remember going back in 2017, and it was like, oh yeah, by the way, we have fascists now. They're out of the shadows.
Yeah.
So you guys were right. But I think the one of the emotions that we've experienced is a desire to figure out ways that we can address this and what we can do as a band, as people that organize shows, and as just at your average citizens or residents, what we can do to kind of combat this and how we can engage people reciprocal in positive messages of, you know, acceptance and, you know, camaraderie and togetherness and inclusiveness and whatever.
It's crazy to think, like you're saying, yeah, now fascism is so much more, I don't want to say acceptable, but you're seeing these fucking assholes coming out of the woodwork, like had, at least in my lifetime, never have been the case. And it's just kind of wild to be like, we're living in a time where that is more prevalent than I've ever seen before. And it's just wild to think that I never would have thought that we'd be in a time period like we're in now, where you're seeing this sort of stuff happen. You're seeing politicians being open about this sort of stuff. It's just freaking mind-blowing.
Absolutely, completely.
I always like to finish up my interviews with asking, what have you guys been listening to lately?
What have I been listening to? The new Nouveau Lascura is pretty fire. I'm pretty into that.
I recently, Spotify added As the Roots Undo by Circle Takes a Square, and I haven't really listened to that album in a long time. I have it on vinyl as well, but it's just been a really long time since I've listened to it.
Dude, that band is so goddamn good.
For sure.
That was the first record that got me into the screamos, As the Roots Undo, but I listened to it the other day, and I was like, this is mixed terribly.
Yeah.
The vocals are like on top of everything else, and they're so loud, and I was like, they need to remix this or remaster.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the like older screamo stuff, I mean, even just like older like hardcore metal stuff, you listen to, you're just like, holy crap, it's incredible, like the production and the mixing and how far some of this has come.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, there's some, you know, the stuff, I think I had my top 20 list albums of 2018 or top 10 albums of 2018, and like, you know, some of the records I really liked were, I know you did an interview with Bostonage a couple weeks ago, and they had one of my favorite records recently.
Further Still is so good.
It's a great record.
So good.
Holy Fawn, Death Spells was definitely
a late find for both of us, but like a fucking big
record I really liked. The band Tangle put out a record called Shoulda Beens. They're from Sweden. We were lucky enough to kind of run into them on our tour a couple of times and hang out with them. You know, those are probably some of the records that I've been really into the last little bit.
I've actually been taking a little bit of a dive into like crust punk lately, so I've been listening to like a lot of Tragedy and a lot of Hero Is Gone.
Did you check out Tragedy's album that they released last year?
Yeah.
I had like no clue that they were releasing anything, and then someone posted on Instagram. I was like, oh shit, they're releasing an album?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been listening to a lot of that stuff. And then like Page 99 is a general always on sort of band for me. And then I also generally listen to like a lot of kind of more like dark wave synthy sort of stuff to industrial sort of stuff. So I've been listening to like Nitzer Ebb and like Light Asylum and things like that these days as well. Last night, Liz Ferris, who's one of my favorite musicians, she used to play, her project's name is Grouper, and she just put out a new record last night under a different name called Nivhek, I think it is.
Oh, hell yes. I had no clue about that.
Yeah. It was just like randomly released yesterday, and I listened to it and cried, and it was great. So I'm definitely going to be listening to that again and enjoying that again.
Nice. And dude, so Rohan, I saw that you are into Caspian.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I fucking love that band.
I think we're all very, very into Caspian.
Dude, they are so goddamn good. Have you guys seen them live before?
Like 7 or 8 times. Yeah.
We've seen them
pretty much every time they come to Toronto.
Together we go usually, and we've gone like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, they're. I mean, I think they're one of my favorite bands because they have sort of the atmosphere and songwriting of a really, really good post-rock band, but they have the energy and kind of the vibe of like a hardcore or screamo band, which is kind of one of the things that we really resonates with us.
I remember the first time I saw them, I was blown away because they sound so much heavier live than they do on recording. They're so goddamn good. My wife and I actually, like, when we got married, we walked down the aisle to like the last half of their song Dust and Disquiet, and then like right after we got married, when we were walking back down the aisle, we walked to Further Up.
That's awesome.
Unreal.
Yeah, awesome. Dude, love that band.
Those guys have a pretty interesting like cross section also in Toronto's like DIY history, because like when I started getting involved in the city's DIY scene, they played a show at this like tiny little Mexican taco place, with like 10 people there, and then they played Soy Bomb, which is, like we said before, this like legendary Toronto DIY space, so we've kind of seen them in and around the fucking kind of screamo world to begin with. So it's
they definitely started as a kind of DIY band. I have tons of respect for that as well.
Hell yeah. And so do you guys have any stuff planned in the coming weeks, coming months?
We have some tour plans in the works. Can't really spill any of that yet. We're working on some details. Hopefully we're going to be able to announce it in the next few weeks. But we're definitely planning on doing some touring. We have a number of new songs in the works. We haven't really figured out what form are they going to take. Right now we argue for at least 10 minutes every practice about whether we're going to put out a 7-inch or whether it's going to be a 10-inch or a full length or what. So we're definitely going to be releasing some new music probably at some point this year, and then some touring as well.
Nice. Yeah. I hope that you guys are going to make it somewhere in like New York or like the Northeast so I could see you guys play, because I haven't gotten a chance to see you guys play yet.
Perhaps.
So hopefully.
Perhaps.
Where can folks check out your music or keep up with what you guys are doing, or like if any news were to drop for you guys, like where would be a good place for people to stay up to date with you guys?
We're on Respire Family pretty much on every platform. RespireFamily.com, Facebook Respire Family, Instagram Respire Family. I think we have a Twitter, but I don't think anyone's ever updated it.
But to get our music, though, for you American listeners, I would highly suggest going through Middleman Records. That's Sean Decker, our very, very good friend's label, who's actually getting a couple represses of Gravity and Grace and Dénouement in very, very soon. So I think that's probably the best direction for American listeners.
Sweet. Well, guys, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me. Man. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I love your music, so I was super freaking excited to be able to talk to you guys.
Likewise.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Thanks so much, man. You know, I really enjoyed my conversation with Egin and Rohan. As I mentioned, listening to them speak and hearing what went into the writing and them creating Dénouement makes me enjoy that album so much more. What I was blown away by is the fact that not only did they write this album, but that they scored everything so that they can make all of the accompanying instruments be able to work with what they were writing. And at the time when I was speaking with them, I was thinking to myself, yeah, this is crazy. They're scoring it, but I didn't really know exactly what goes into scoring music. I had to ask my wife about that. She plays flute. She's been playing for like 20 years or something like that. She plays in a symphony, and so she explained to me what goes into scoring music and how in-depth that is and how much work goes into that. That just blew my mind. That just made me dumbfounded that they were able to do that and able to create such an incredible album like they did. So hats off to Egin, Rohan, and all of the band members of Respire. As they mentioned, it's a goddamn family. There's so many of them. I'll make sure to add links in the show notes to how you guys could check out their music, how you can cop some of their merch, and I'll make sure to add how you could follow them on social media. So make sure to do that. They just announced recently that they're going to be playing with Pelican and Cloakroom in Toronto on June 21st. And son of a bitch bastard, I'm trying to make it work that I could hopefully be at that show in Toronto, because that would be absolutely awesome. So yeah, that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed this one. Like I said, I really enjoyed my time speaking to Egin and Rohan, and I hope I get a chance to see Respire play, because I feel like their set would be incredible, especially seeing them with a bunch of freaking horns and other string instruments. That'd be awesome. So you guys know the drill. Subscribe to the show, follow us. I always appreciate that stuff. And then get out there, create something cool. I will see you next time.